you saw the very best players the entire country has to offer, and you saw it throughout the course of the weekend.
He's growing, he's improving at such a rapid rate. He's going to be a very good player.
This guy's a cross between Sean Marion and Lamar Odom. He's a 6'8" lefty, a high-level athlete, but also got a little bit of point-forward skills in him as he can handle and pass the ball extremely well. At this point, they are simply the standard by which everyone else is judged in prep school basketball. He's considering the likes of Michigan, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas.
Welcome back to the Upside Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and this week we have a different kind of episode for you. We have Mike Gioseffi, and Mike is the newest addition to the Ringers podcast lineup with his Sports Card Nonsense podcast, and I'm excited to have him for a couple different reasons. First and foremost, Mike is the best at what he does. He is at the top of this sports card field, and if you're anything like me, maybe you grew up and you were passionate about sports cards as a kid, and you are now finding that it has become big business. Second, Mike is from the New England area, local Massachusetts guy, although he's recently relocated. And as I said, this is an industry that is really gaining a ton of momentum. So, Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be. Hey, you said I'm the best at what I do. It's not true, but I'll take it, man.
That's what I mean.
I'm willing to show up for compliments. I'm here.
That's what they tell me. Gary V doesn't count. This isn't like his. This isn't his core thing.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. So, Mike, again, thank you so much for joining us. Now, please correct me if I got any of this wrong, but it was about 6 or 7 years ago. You had your own construction company, and you got out of it to do sports card kind of trading. Is that the right word, on a daily basis?
Yeah, just kind of like a side hustle. It was, hey, painting and drywall and framing, all that stuff's fun, but it was like, hey, there's a side hustle we can do and make a few bucks, me and a buddy here in Nashville. And so just kind of did both for a while. And then it just seemed like, looking at the numbers, I've always been kind of a numbers guy. Man, we're making X amount of dollars without swinging a hammer and without, killing myself. Yeah. Kind of just started making sense about 5 or 6 years ago. So we just got rid of the construction and just went full time with this.
Now, I got to tell you, I should have prefaced all of this by saying you are the expert at what you do. I'm a novice. Now, I grew up, sports cards were a huge part of my upbringing.
Nice.
My mom and I would go to a sports card. I remember every week we'd get the paper. We'd look. You remember when the sports card shows were listed in the paper?
Oh, yeah.
And you'd
like
run
in the
down,
classified section. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we'd do. And we'd go anywhere in New England. I grew up in Connecticut, but whether it was Massachusetts or whatever, and it all started because my mom found old baseball cards that she had collected when she was a kid. And then, I don't know if you remember this, but did you ever go to any of those shows growing up?
Oh, yeah. Everything in Mass, like the Shriners was the big show growing up. Me and my brother went there. But yeah, same thing. Every weekend we were at something.
And there was always an old retired player there, right, signing autographs, at the good ones anyway.
Yep.
And so now it's turned into this huge business, and it's not about kids and parents going and trying to get, a $10 card or a $5 card at a local show, but it's become, a market where there are big time investments being made, right?
Yeah, sad to say, as popular as the space has become, with anything else, your entry level price just raises so high. Yeah, so definitely kids are starting to get left behind to a degree. And it's become a big thing. I mean, like you said, we talked with Gary V, and on and off air, he's telling us about hedge fund groups that are buying in. Of course, my boss Simmons is worth a ton of money, and him and his guys just bought into golden auction for $40 million. So there's just a lot of people spending a ton of money in the space now, not just collectors and guys like me and you who grew up liking it. Now it's just, hey, I can come in and make money doing this, and that's why they're in it.
Now, if you'll indulge me, as I said, kind of assume that most of my listeners are on the novice side, and so I know this is going to be just kind of sports cards for dummies, but
sure.
So I apologize for that. But if, let's say, my generation, which markets, I'm going to rephrase this, which markets are the ones that are at their peak now? I've heard you say stuff about vintage baseball and 90s basketball. Are those the things that are at their peak right now?
Yeah, so vintage has always been the gold standard, right? Vintage baseball especially. I mean, you can never go wrong. If you've bought a mantle any time in the last, I don't know, 20 years since I've been in the hobby, you've not lost money. Like you've done well with it. Mays, Mantle, Hank Aaron, Ted Williams, those guys, their market has stayed steady and continued to grow. And then they've got a bump like recently, like everything else has. The biggest explosion though has been, so Adam, I'm 30, I'll be 35 next month. How old are you?
I'm 40 and it's brutal.
Okay. I like that. So
My
I'm
hips hurt more when I wake up in the morning. It sucks. Yeah.
So a youthful 35 and a brutal 40-year-old.
Yeah.
So same generation growing up though, similar.
Yeah.
Our guys growing up now, that's where you've seen the 10x explosion. You know, Larry Bird was my guy growing up, even though he played before I was really watching. His rookie cards have more than, I mean, quite frankly, you're probably looking at 20 times the value. If a PSA 8 rookie was 800, I use that because this is stuff I have. I paid 800 years ago. Now it's 14 to 16,000 given the day. The 80 stuff,
14 to 16,000.
Yeah, a PSA 8 Bird that was $800, 15 to 16 grand right now.
And how rare is a PSA 8 is part of the grading scale? But correct me if I'm wrong. It assesses the quality of the cut and the centering and all that stuff.
Every aspect of the card, 1 through 10. So a PSA 8, I believe there's just under 3,000 of those that grade. Now, if you jump up to a PSA 9, I want to say there's about 300. A PSA 9 sells for like 60 to 70,000 right now. But years ago, I mean, I passed on PSA 9s for 7,500 5 years ago.
Mike, we're entering the part of the podcast, and I'm sure you deal with this all the time, where I'm just going to ask completely self-serving questions based on what I have in boxes, I think, somewhere, if I didn't throw the freaking things out. So what if someone, let's say, again, 40-year-old with bad hips, sits there and says, you know what? I got a lot of this stuff in my basement. What does someone like that do right now? And they know nothing. They haven't followed the field, the industry. They're just saying, wow, I wonder if I'm sitting on something here.
Sure. So, and let me just say this, Adam. This is our target audience, too, on the podcast on The Ringer. Cool. 99% of the people reaching out are in your spot. Hey, I'm 40 and I feel brutal and my hips are terrible. Usually they don't usually share the
podcast. We follow sports card nonsense on all the social media.
But honestly, that's the question. Like, hey, I used to collect when I was a kid. I know I've got a couple boxes in the basement. What do I do?
Right.
So first thing, and we always preach this, educate yourself. Go through your box. If you've never heard of somebody as a sports fan, it's probably because they're not that great. Like if you pull out some Michael Jordan stuff, great. First thing I would do is just go through and pull out anybody whose name I recognize for being a star of any kind.
The guys who aren't the common cards, right? The common cards not even listed in Beckett.
Right, because common cards, I mean, even now, commons from the 80s and 90s are still worth pennies, if that. But you start pulling out star cards, guys who are, again, notable all-star Hall of Fame guys, pull those out. The toughest thing then is educating yourself on conditioning. Because the average person looks at a card, oh, this looks pretty good. A card guy comes in and looks and says, well, the corner's dinged, it's off-centered. So I just tell people the easiest thing to do, go to eBay, put in you have a 1991 Larry Bird. Okay, put in 1991 Larry Bird and put in PSA 8, just so you have an idea on condition. And 8 is considered near mint. And then just scrutinize it. Does my card look as good as this? It does? Okay, great. So that's probably going to give you an idea of what it's selling for. The other thing is a couple other assets. If you have a local card shop, read some reviews. Make sure it's not some clown in a jersey trying to rip people off. For the most part, though, shop guys are pretty good. At this point, because so many of the bad ones have been rooted out, go have them take a look. Hey, can I get an appraisal on this? I'm not looking to sell, but I want to know if I have anything. He can probably help you out. And then Facebook forums, just Instagram, Twitter, all these different forums, take some pictures and literally put it up with the caption, hey, I need help with value. Anybody have any ideas? And you will get, like our Facebook group, that's where we drive traffic.
Yeah, I was just going to ask
people do that.
Do you have those forums set up under your own umbrella there?
Yeah, sports cards nonsense. So we're on Instagram, Twitter, all that other stuff too. But on Facebook, that's to me the most active market and the most active forum. So hey, Adam just found these 30 cards in his basement. Take some decent pictures, put them in a post on Facebook, and guys are gonna just tell you, hey, there's nothing there. Hey, there's this card might be worth a little bit. There's a bunch of knowledgeable people in the hobby now, though.
The process of getting a card graded, how does that work?
Yeah, so again, you have basically two main companies right now, PSA and BGS, which is Beckett, who used to put out that magazine. Maybe they still do. I'm not even sure. So literally, you go to their website. We actually use group submitters, so people who have full-time businesses where you send them your cards, they'll get them prepped, ready to go, fill out the paperwork, and send them off. The toughest thing with that is for cards that are not monster cards, your $50 to $200 cards, the pricing increases lately have become brutal. I mean, it's very expensive to do it now, and the wait times, you're talking months, if not a year. So it has to be something really worth something at this point in time to do it, because it's become the craze. Because it can take a $50 card all the way up to $500 just by getting it graded correctly. So the market caught on to that. Everybody's flooding into that grading process.
And that can make a huge difference in the valuation of the card. It's like if you've got that, is it a piece of paper that says like PSA whatever? Is that how it works?
Well, just to give you, so like you would hold up, I got a PSA holder right here. I always do. I'm a card nerd. It's just a PSA holder. It tells you what year the card is, the make of the card, and then the actual grade. Nice glare there for you too. That was a good shot by me. But so it guarantees authenticity first of all, and then it gives you that grade 1 through 10. And the grading market is so set, really. You know, you could have that same Willie Mays card if it's raw, not graded. First of all, is it real? Second of all, what's the actual condition? It's so subjective. So there's a ton of variance in price when it's raw. When a card's graded, hey, this is what a 5 generally goes for. There's your idea of what it's going to be priced at. And
is there? I mean So again, from a novice perspective, that makes me a little uneasy of saying like, hey, I'm going to put my rookie card, my Jordan rookie card. I don't have a Jordan rookie card, but I'm going to put my Jordan rookie card in the mail.
You got some Jordan rookies sitting around, Adam?
I don't. I wish I did.
Okay, I thought you were holding up.
I may know someone who does though.
Nice.
There and like, how do you know? I'm going to put it in the mail and hope I get it back. Has there been any? What do you say to people like me who are kind of reluctant to do that?
Yeah. So honestly, I myself personally, I use third-party group submitters. There's a guy here in Nashville I use all the time, Nash Cards. I send it right to him. I mean, Chris is doing huge business. He's not going to take one of my cards to make a few bucks. He's a guy I trust. He's been in the hobby. So there's 3 guys I use. Him, Sappy Sports Cards is on Facebook, and then PC Sports Cards. They do all my grading. I just kind of divvy up my stuff, send it off. They then take care of the process of sending it in. Their websites give you they kind of update you along the way. PSA has received your order. PSA is processing the order. Hey, your order is shipping back, that kind of stuff. And then your grades pop. As soon as they're graded, the website updates and lets you know what you got. But I just use trusted people. I'm not going to send it to some guy I don't know because, I don't trust people blindly. But there's reputable companies, and that's why we've kind of teamed up with some of those vendors on our website to direct people to guys I know we can trust.
And are those actual like stores that you will walk into in the Nashville area, or is there?
Yeah. So there's two here in Nashville. Grand Slam Collectibles is just on the south side of the city, and then Nash Cards is right in Nashville too. Yep.
And now you're from Lawrence, Mass. Originally, right?
Lawrence and Haverhill. Yep.
So if you were still shout out Noah Vonleh, if you were still in the in that area, who would you use in the New England, in around here?
I'll be honest with you. I've been gone for 20 years. I have no clue.
Oh, wow.
I have nothing. I mean, I think the 2 card shops I grew up going to, I know one of the guys died about a decade ago, and I think the other one closed down 15, 20 years. I mean, I don't get back nearly enough to mess around with card shops there.
Is there a regional component to this? Is the market hotter in a place like Nashville than it may be in a place like Boston, or not really?
It used to be. Like when you and I were growing up, again, because when you were growing up and me, like you could, if you wanted a card, the only place you could get it was that card show, right? So if you're going
there were stores when I was growing up. There are a lot of those too. Yeah.
Or stores, right? So you're growing up in Connecticut. If you want to buy a Don Mattingly card, no one's selling Mattingly cheap because there's a bunch of clown Yankee fans up there. I hope you're not a Yankees fan. No, I should have asked you beforehand.
Socks.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I don't mind killing this interview right now.
Yeah,
but you know what I mean. So regionally, back then, when there was no other outlet to buy cards, if I'm set up in New York, I'm putting a crazy premium on Yankees cards. Larry Bird, when I was growing up, everything was super expensive because we're all Bird freaks. Tom Brady, same thing. Right. But now what's happened is, I do maybe 5% of my buying in person. Maybe. And with COVID, nothing now. Even before that, you go to 2 or 3 of the national shows a year or regional shows. That's great. But when I want a card, I go to eBay or these Facebook groups and forums or Twitter. So there's really no regional aspect to it anymore.
So let me ask you a macro question. So if you're, again, someone who has these in your basement, from a timing standpoint, I've heard people talk about whether this is a bubble. I've heard you talk about how, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't particularly like that word because all markets are going to fluctuate a certain amount. And is the market good right now? Yes. But is it a bubble? Probably not. Is this a time that you would recommend someone to sell? And if so, are there specific time periods or sports where the market is especially high right now?
Yeah, so the bubble thing, it does. The bubble. Well, I'm a short man from Boston. Obviously, I'm irritable. The bubble thing irritates me because people just throw that term around now.
Yeah.
Really, though, everything is a bubble. If we're going to say a
Right.
bubble is just a selling component, and that's the economy in that market, then everything's a bubble. Do
Yeah.
I think it's near the peak of it where it's going to burst? No, because again, people way smarter who have more money than me. That list we went over earlier, celebrities, all these guys. They're not coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to buy a $5,000 card for myself. They're coming in and saying, I'm going to throw tens of millions of dollars at something. People like that don't generally lose money.
Right.
So that's one area. And the other thing we're seeing is, we get thousands of emails at this point. It's almost daily. That's why we've got some interns kicking back responses and trying to help people like you're mentioning. Hey, I haven't been in the card market in 2 decades. I want to get back in. And all of a sudden, guys are our age, 35, 40. They have interest here. I always make the case, I'm not going to go out and buy a Picasso painting or a Monet or something I have no interest in, but I am going to go buy a Tom Brady card or autographed jersey to put on my wall. And now we're getting to the point, again, 35, 40 years old, we get a little bit of spending cash. And not only do you get to get a piece of art, but now it's like, hey, it's an investment. So I think the demand is still so much greater than the supply that we're nowhere near a burst of a bubble. I just don't think that's realistic.
Yep.
When it comes to timing, though, yeah. Timing is everything, right?
The seller's market?
It definitely a seller's market. Got to be selective, though, right? So, for example, football right now, although it's extremely hot, is lower than it was 2 months ago when there was playoff hype.
Okay.
If you're in a position where you don't need money, I wouldn't sell football right now. Wait until the season starts. Wait until there's hype. Same thing with basketball. With basketball with active players, I'm waiting to sell LeBron until he goes on a finals run. Jason Tatum's been injured been down with COVID. The Celtics are 500 right now. I'm not selling him right now. He's near the floor. I'd rather sell a little higher. It's like the stock market, though. What's the hype? What's the on-field production look like or on court? Like Joel Embiid to me is a guy I would sell. He's the front runner to be MVP, one of the best teams in the league. I think he's going to get injured, and I think they're going to blow it in the playoffs. I'd sell him now.
How about the older stuff?
Man,
how about guys who aren't playing anymore? There's certain markets that are hot right now if they're already out. I would assume like if they're getting ready to go into the Hall of Fame or something like that, that seems like an obvious answer. But are there certain like generations of certain sports, or does it not manifest itself like that?
No, absolutely it does. So we've seen, with Hank Aaron dying, it reminded the hobby community how much of an impact that has on pricing. Not to be morbid, but it's just the way it is. When a guy dies, there is so much attention. So Hank Aaron stuff went absolutely through the roof. Just about doubled, and he was already at a premium, his vintage stuff. What we then saw was the spillover effect, and this is what I spent a bunch of money. The day after Aaron died, I was like, okay, so there's not really any money to be made buying him at the height. But my instant thought was, who are his contemporaries who are all-time greats? Willie Mays, Sandy Koufax. I started loading up on Willie Mays and Koufax back then because, again, not to be morbid, but that's what this market dictates. When a guy dies, his pricing spikes. So we've seen a huge spike there, and then we're finally starting to see the spike in other areas. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is a guy I rant about all the time, even though I can't stand him because I don't like tall people and I don't like Lakers. That dude is like a top 3 guy of all time, has no hobby love compared to what he should. So I've been loading up on his rookies. I think that market's about to boom. Yeah. Football is finally vintage football. Growing up, I'm sure you saw this like I did. Card shows were all vintage baseball. Nobody had vintage football.
Right.
Well, now Walter Payton cards. That Walter Payton card sitting on my desk is a PSA 9, goes for less than 10 grand. But you talk about a PSA 9 of a Mantle or anybody else from the 50s, those baseball players, tens of thousands, if not more. I just think the football vintage market has been so far behind. That's the next one that's already started to boom and is going to continue to rise, in my opinion.
Do you remember, and I'm sure you do, I'm not going to describe it accurately, but there was a set. It was like the year that it was like the best NBA draft set, best NBA draft in history. It had Jordan, Olajuwon,
86.
There was I don't know, was it Fleer or something that produced? And so all those rookie cards came out in the same set. And I think Barkley was in there, maybe Drexler.
Ewing. Stockton. Huge year.
Is there any value in because I remember back in the day, I used to be about, I'm going to put together a complete set. Is there any value in that anymore? Or is it just about the individual stars?
No, there's still a market for sets. Yeah, individual stars are the bigger draw because most people are not going to spend money on the 150 commons in that set. But
Yeah.
there's still definitely a market for sets, especially iconic sets. Like you're talking about that 86 Flair set. Obviously, those guys were drafted in 84, but basketball cards didn't come out annually then. 86 was the first year you had it. So all those guys drafted before, it just was a perfect storm. I mean, Olajuwon, Ewing, Barkley, Jordan. Yeah. I think that was Drexler and Stockton and Malone as well. I mean, just a crazy loaded class. So, yeah, that set, there's tons of guys who just chase individual cards they need from that set.
What is like a ballpark for something for like a set like that? I mean, I'm sure it would depend on where it gets graded, but,
Yeah.
if it was...
all condition. I mean, because, again, just the Jordan, a PSA 10 sells for $750,000.
But that's like finding a diamond on the street, right? I mean,
yeah, a PSA 5 is probably more accurate. Like a PSA 5 is, you can see some wear on the corners. It's not centered. I think a PSA 5 now does like, don't quote me, like 8,000-ish. But same thing, like a Malone, a PSA 9 or 10 Malone is big money. All those rookies are 4 figures if they're a 9 or above. So if you were just going to go out and get those cards raw, kind of beat up, but they still present well, you could probably spend $10,000 to $12,000, I would think, on that set roughly. But it's just so condition subjective. It's hard to put any realistic number.
All right, I've got 2 more questions if you'll allow me. I know you're a busy guy. First one is, you mentioned memorabilia. Is that something that is that within your area of specialization as much as the sports cards?
Not as much, but I mean my room's full of it. Yep. I mean all the stuff behind me.
Is there as much value in that world as there is sports cards right now?
Yes and no. There's not the exclusivity factor, right? There's only so many Jordan rookies that are going to grade high. Mm-hmm. Whereas like like the ball behind me over my head is Bird and Magic. Well, they're still signing stuff all the time. You know, Brady's still signing a bunch of those helmets. So they've seen a little bit of a bump, but it's not super exclusive because those guys are still alive and signing. Again, Hank,
the supply demand part can get altered. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other tough thing is guys coming back in the hobby, you might be able to convince your wife, hey, I'm going to buy a card for $5,000, but I'm just going to put it in a safe, as opposed to I'm going to buy a basketball and display it on my wall. You got to have you got to have a really understanding wife. You're going to start showing stuff off though.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's definitely a market there. Huge market.
And is there some place you go, like you mentioned the places for the cards? Is there some place you go if you have memorabilia to try and figure out how much that is maybe worth?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of the same. eBay, there's a huge memorabilia market. And again, what you want to look for, though, is sold listings. I don't worry about what people are asking. You got a bunch of clowns who ask crazy money for stuff. Sold listings on eBay. There's another website, 130, and then the word point.com, that has just a database of all completed eBay listings. Larry Bird. The biggest thing with memorabilia, though, is authentication. And you've got a couple major companies now. But Adam and Mike authenticate this ball. I'm not sure.
We can get that done, Mike. You and I, we'll be big.
Are you in? I'm ready to do this.
Let's do it. Actually, here's and this is my last question. This is perfect.
Sure.
Because I do think there's an overlap here. So what I do, I work in the scouting business,
right?
And that's most of what I do is watching kids in high school and then following them to college and the NBA, and it's strictly basketball. But as I'm preparing for this interview and listening to other podcast episodes you've done and reading stuff you've done, and I'm reading articles about you, and I'm listening to some of the parallels between sports, like the online betting things that have really surfaced and risen the interest in sports and across the board. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? Like the scouting knowledge is going to be especially important here.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to kind of leave it open-ended because the overlap in our two worlds is really interesting to me. And so I was just curious about your overall thoughts on that. And then along those same lines, at what point do cards start to get made? Like at what point is Cade Cunningham already had his first card, or has that not happened yet? So if you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, honestly, a guy like you, and you're specifically NBA, right? That's all I read anyways, just
specifically
NBA, right?
basketball. So it's mostly high school basketball is where I'm in Connecticut now. Last night I drove to Maryland to see a prep school workout, then I stopped in Philly to see a high school game. It's why I look like I do this morning. But it's but yeah, that's my life.
So the NBA to me is first of all, it's the most thriving market, basketball in general, direct connection to what you're saying. Because one thing we're seeing now is people are starting to chase early production stuff of guys before their actual pro cards are made. So like Trevor Lawrence right now, go football for a second, just because I'm a little more familiar with football.
Sure.
I'm sure the same thing exists in basketball, though. Some schools are putting out programs or whatever they're doing, little local promos where, hey, there's a card of this guy, not made by Topps or Panini, just a card, whoever made it, just a locally made thing. We're starting to see a bit of a spillover into that because it's like, hey, once their real rookies come out, they're crazy expensive, right, for highly touted prospects. But I can get in on the ground level, and it's kind of a novice thing, but it's like it's still a card of this guy. And with so many new people coming in, they don't really care that it isn't Topps or it isn't the brand. Just, hey, this is a card of the guy I like, and it's an early thing. We're starting to see a bit of traction there. When it comes to knowledge, though, I mean, I think you've got, you could name the top 50 guys in the league right now, or excuse me, in the upcoming draft. I couldn't name more than 2, honestly. I don't follow college at all.
And you maybe, I mean, part of the business is figuring out like the guy, and it's an imperfect science, but you're trying to figure out the guy who's drafted in the 20s who may turn out to be pretty good. You're trying to figure out, and that, I've heard you talk about like now may be a good time to sell your Zion Williamson stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
but like,
no, you're right.
You're trying to project like the long-term winner and not the short-term gain. So that there seems to be, in my mind, a lot of overlap because a lot of the pushback I get when I say like, hey, this guy's really not that good. Everybody says, you're a, whatever, he had 30 last night. And I was like, yeah, but I'm projecting it out for 10 years. And in your world, that's really relevant.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for example,
I meant
if you're
10
a guy,
years, not 30 years, by the way. Yeah.
Well, it could be 30 years. Let's who knows? But like if you're a guy who's all of a sudden early in on a guy like Giannis, or as my co-host says, Giannis. I like Giannis better, actually. I think I'm going to start using that. But like, I'm sure there were some scouts out there who said, hey, this kid's super raw, hasn't played a ton of organized ball, but we project him 5 years from now to be an MVP.
Jonathan Gaboni, ESPN. He was the guy who found him. Yeah.
There you go. I mean, so if that guy had the wisdom to say, you know what, not only do I think that, but I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and invest in his rookie stuff when it's nothing, that dude would have made 500 times his return. Wow. So a guy like yourself, you're talking about.
Mike, we're shutting this podcast down now because you and I are going to talk offline. All right.
I'm in. So we're authenticating sports items, first of all. Adam and Mike's authentication, and we're going crazy. But it's true, man. You're going to see some kid playing in Connecticut who's going to be a late second-round pick, and you're going to say, hey, I actually think this kid's going to be a contributor at some point. Yeah. If you could do that and then buy his cards when they come out before he pops, huge crossover.
And when do they come out? When does a first legitimate card come out?
So in general, right after the draft, you start seeing college uniform stuff come out after the draft. And then after that, you'll start to see the pro uniforms slowly start to. So like for this year's class, like with LaMelo, he's had 2 or 3 college releases. Again, just a actual card professionally made, but featuring him in his college or he was European League, right? Wherever LaMelo
he was all over the place.
Yeah. So, but for most people, like Zion college uniform would have been his first few releases. Then you start to see the pro uniform stuff leak out after that.
Mike, I have monopolized enough of your time. This was fascinating. You can follow Mike on Twitter and Instagram at SportsCardNonsense. You can also find him at sportscardnonsense.com. His podcast is latest on the Ringers network. Mike, did I miss anything there? If people like me are intrigued and want to dive into this, where else can they find you?
That's it, man. Sports Cards Nonsense everywhere. The website, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We even have Jesse on TikTok now, dancing, shaking his beautiful self on there a little bit. So, yeah, anywhere you want to find it, we're there.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Good luck with the Patriots gear out in Nashville. I'm sure that doesn't make you a popular guy.
You got it, man. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you, guys. That is the latest episode of the Upside Podcast. I was thrilled to have Mike on. I know this was a little bit of a different subject for us, but it's certainly an intriguing one with all kinds of overlap and potential in the years to come. So as always, I'm your host, Adam Finkelstein, and thank you for listening to The Upside.